We're delighted to be joined today for a chat with friend of the podcast, Steve Whitton from Men Able, who's here to talk about National Inclusion Week and why it's important for motor trade businesses. So welcome back, Steve.
Oh, thanks, guys. It's absolutely great to be back.
So hi, Steve, and again, echo that with Curtis. Welcome back. So just say there, we were keen to get you back on the show to talk through what National Inclusion Week has meant for you and the team of Men Able. But first, all we can tell us a little bit about the event, and which is now in its 9th year, and this year it's themed around unity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think isn't it typical that we have these kind of focus type weeks that draw our attention, shine a light on these issues. And, I think this year is particularly poignant because it comes at what we hope is the back end of the pandemic. He says with his, forever optimistic. But also, there's a lot gone on in the last year, 18 months with, the death of George Floyd and, various sort of things that have drawn attention to what's going on in the wider world. So I think for us, we at the beginning of Men Able, we were kind of questioned as to, well, is it just for men? And it became very evident, very clearly and very quickly that, no, it's not. It's about an inclusive working environment across the industry. So this week to shine a light on inclusion, means a lot to us because it's all part of the whole mental health journey, which I'm sure we'll talk about as we go through this.
And Steve, how would you describe inclusion in the automotive sector? I'm aware of formalised HR programs that have been introduced in some of the bigger dealer groups, certainly over recent years, and I've talked to some of those groups about it. But are these the exception now, or are they increasingly becoming the rule?
I'm seeing more and more of those crop up, I have to say, in our conversations with businesses across the sector, particularly dealers. And as you say, the dealer groups are doing some great work around that. But how I would describe inclusion in the sector is I think we have a legacy of a sort of stereotypical masculinity.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a bit of a barrier to inclusion, if I'm honest, because we're target driven, we're objective driven, and when you have this sort of stereotypical view of how things should be done, it's very easy and very tempting to recruit in our own likeness. And I think that perhaps, and again, if you think about the mental health angle on it, there's a lot of insecurity and a lot of lack of confidence, I think, across the industry as a whole in many areas. And I think that can have a tendency to cause us to recruit someone into a position that we think might be the lowest risk. And of course, our default position as a human being is a low risk is going to be somebody who's just like me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's an interesting point, Steve, because I was talking to a dealer group probably 2-3 months ago, and they identified that women typically like buying from women, yet this dealer group had very few women salespeople on their payroll. And they, as a result of that, they were actively targeting increasing their recruitment of women for sales positions.
Well, I think that's brilliant. I mean, I think that's also then links back to why there's a connection with this and mental health, because, along with that stereotypical masculinity, if you like, there's also been this sort of stereotypical amount of hours that people work and the amount of effort that people put in and the sort of the picture of what the role in a dealership looks like. And I think, the work around inclusion isn't just about gender or ethnicity. It's also about making those roles inclusive for people who perhaps don't want to work to that usual model of 50, 60, 70-hour weeks. And therefore, I think as a result, it will probably make the industry a lot more attractive to people who may be in a position where actually they'd love to be in car sales but can only do a 3-day week, for example.
Yeah.
Or do you see where I'm going with that? Because
yeah, definitely. And with the pandemic and the lockdowns, people working from home, do you think that will actually change now? And employers in our industry, especially amongst dealer groups, they'll be more flexible in the terms that they roll out for employees. So definitely new employees coming in who maybe just can't commit to those sort of hours, but still want a job.
Well, do you know what? I think I would absolutely say I think it's changing already. And I'm speaking to more and more people who, are quite liking working from home or working in a slightly different way. And I think the industry, to some extent, is almost going to have its hand forced to make some changes. And as I said, inclusivity is not just about gender and ethnicity or whatever. It's also about saying, no, actually, we can get the job done by having people working from home, or having them only come in a couple of days a week, or having them work in a completely different way. Alongside the legacy of how we've worked, your showroom does not need to be stocked with people who sit there diligently, 8 till 6 every day of the week. And I think it's those kind of things that are going to, once we start thinking about that's going to help with inclusion, I think.
And I mean, you mentioned earlier about obviously the pandemic, and we know that on Thursday of this week we've seen the end of the furlough support and other support that are being implemented by the UK government throughout the pandemic for the last sort of 18 months. What impact do you think? I mean, we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about, mental health, and you just mentioned there about that sort of, and Curtis about that new behaviours from working from home and flexi time, things like that. And what should the employees start to be thinking about as we see the end of this 18-month period of people being in either working very differently hours or not at all, being supported through the furlough scheme?
Yeah, I think, again, this is another thing that's just going to shine a light on, sort of traditional working practices. With Menable, we've been very clear from the beginning that yes, it's about mental health, but it's actually about shining a light on culture and working practice. And I think, again, the end of the furlough scheme is certainly going to make employers think about the structure that they have within their business, but it's actually making employees think about it as well. And I mean, we are hearing stories of sales execs that are leaving the industry because actually they don't want to work those kind of hours anymore. They don't want to be doing the kind of things that we were doing pre-pandemic. And if they're not fully committed to the trade, which some people obviously believe that they are, many of us clearly are, it's very tempting to go, hang on a minute, I can go and drive a truck. I mean, I'll get the sound of that. Or do different types of work completely. So, I think it's, the whole thing shone a spotlight on all of it for everyone, if I'm honest, and employees are now just as likely to question what they're doing and what direction they're heading.
And finally, Steve, National Inclusion Week, it actually ends on Sunday, but like most of these national awareness days and weeks, the themes need to be part of our everyday working lives, don't they? So what best practice tips have you for listeners listening to this?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in terms of, these national and international weeks and days come along and they shine a light on it sort of temporarily. And I think this one in particular should now make us all start to think, this is the route we're heading, and we all need to work together to make our industry more attractive, more inclusive, more diverse. And in all of that, I think it's exciting. I really do genuinely think it's exciting, and I would say that my top tip is, and people, the old days when I was doing this in a classroom in front of people, I would have put 4 words on a flip chart, and at the top of it would be targets, and then underneath that would be strategy, and underneath that would be people, and underneath that would be customer experience. And I think the industry typically does things in that order.
Yeah.
It starts with targets. Let's work out what the strategy is to get there. Let's employ the right people, or in inverted commas, right people, and that will deliver customer experience. And I think for me, my biggest tip would be turn that on its head, completely turn it on its head. Start with customer experience. What do your customers want?
Yeah.
What's the model in the world that they live in? Then use that to decide, well, what are the best people to deliver that? And if it's some of the people like we've described, a back to work mum, for example, who can only do 3 days a week, she might be fantastic at the job. Let's not do stuff that's typically what we've always done. Put that together with your strategy, and I genuinely do believe the targets will take care of themselves.
Yeah, no, I think there is a lot going on. We know that we do speak about this a lot on the podcast with the sort of strategies from some of the retailers now. We've got the 30% club, and there's the Women in Drive and things like this. So there's lots going on in the sector. But as you say, there's always more that can be done, and probably keeping this as a culture, and as you say, maybe putting people first and customers first, and then your targets and strategy around that is probably where we are going to see different working behaviours, different working patterns, and employees thinking differently about their work-life balance as we come out of this pandemic. But as always, Steve, it's been a pleasure having you on and sharing your thoughts on how inclusion can be improved in the industry and connected to mental health and well-being of our sector. And if listeners want to reach out to you, and what's the best way to do that and to get in touch?
Yeah, as always, it's menable.org is the website. They can get in touch directly through that, even book a time to have a chat if they want. Or they can connect with me on social media, because I don't know if you noticed, but I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit.
Are you really, Steve?
Never seen it. I better look it up.
Not.
I've been enjoying your vlogs this week, yes. Steve. They've been great.
Yeah, I did get quite emotional on the one that I did yesterday, I think. So anyway, I'm on the Stephen J. Whitton on LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
So anyone can contact me on that. And as always, it's an absolute pleasure talking with you guys. So thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Many thanks, Steve. It's great to have you back in our virtual studio as well. So, anyway, you're back next week with one of your Menable moments. So until then, many thanks, and catch up with you next week.
See you soon, take care. All the best. Bye. See you soon.